into it whenever you guys are ready.
Okay. Hi, everyone. KGW investigative reporter Kristen Severance here. We're joined now with our assistant news director, John Tierney. He's also in charge of investigations and special projects here. And John, let's talk about classrooms in crisis. So we've really been, I feel like, living this story for the last, couple months. But this really all started because of what teachers told you.
Yeah, so we were reporting some stories in the fall related to the governor's race, and we spent a lot of time covering education policy in the governor's race between Governor Kate Brown and State Representative Newt Buehler. And as part of that process, we invited those candidates into some classrooms to talk with teachers about issues that the teachers were facing, to hear how they would tackle those issues as governor. Well, during that process, my colleague Laurel Porter and I, we were talking with these teachers. We'd have phone calls with them. We'd say, hey, what's the top issue you're facing? We figured they'd say things like classroom size, not enough hours for planning, we don't have enough money for supplies, we spend too much time teaching to the test. When we talked to elementary teachers, like without fail, they were saying, oh, the top issue we face is disruptive behavior from students. And so we were like, oh, okay, I have a son who's young and not quite to school age, and so I never heard of that being such a pressing issue for students, or for teachers, but they were explaining to us the behavior they were seeing from students with yelling, kicking, screaming, violent outbursts in class, often to the point where they would have to remove every other teacher or every other student from a classroom because one student was having such a disruptive outburst. Mm-hmm. Sometimes turning violent towards teachers being hit by students or bitten on the arm, bitten on the leg. And these teachers were saying, yeah, we're seeing this all the time. And so that's what kind of piqued our interest. And we said, we gotta dig more into this.
Yeah, we have to look into this. So if you're joining us, we really want to hear from you. If you watched our big investigation last night, which I know so many of you have, because we've gotten an overwhelming response, email after email, comments from teachers saying, this is happening to me, this is happening in my classroom. So if you're a teacher and you're joining us and you have a comment you want to weigh in, please comment below. Our producer, also a member of our investigative team, Destiny, is monitoring your comments, and she will let us know your comments or questions, and so we want to hear from you, please. Okay, so we heard from these teachers. You and Laurel both thought, disruptive incidents, that's interesting. And so then we kind of took it from there. So let's talk about the next step.
Yeah, so I brought this issue to Kristen, and we started kind of looking into it more. We had some conversations with members of various teachers' unions. Every school district has a union that represents teachers in that district, and then those all roll up to a statewide union called the Oregon Education Association, which also happens to be a very politically powerful entity in this state. They certainly have the ear of a lot of politicians. And as we started talking to these union officials to try to get to talking to more teachers, that was kind of the the way we approached trying to find more teachers to talk to us. The union officials said, you got to keep digging in this. Like, there is a story here. And they connected us with more teachers, especially elementary school teachers, because that's where we're seeing this certain kind of disruption, this kind of unexplained spike in disruptive behavior among kids kind of in elementary school, kindergarten, first, second, third grade especially. So union folks connected us with more of those teachers. But interestingly, when we started talking to the teachers, they said, you got to do this story. Our voices need to be heard. We also called district administrators and said, hey, this is what we're hearing. Like, what are you hearing? Is this something that's on your radar? And without fail, district administrators were like, yeah, this is a big issue. We called law enforcement, school resource officers that we know, sources of ours, and they said, yeah, this is a huge issue. You got to do this story. And basically, we called lawmakers. They said, we're hearing this from our constituents and from teachers. You got to do this story. And it's, as you know, it's unusual to work on a story of this kind of magnitude and call all these different sources, different stakeholders, and have all of them be like, yeah, please tell this story.
Right. I really cannot remember another story where every single lawmaker I called and said, so we're looking into classroom disruptions in Oregon. Almost I can think of one person who didn't do the interview. Everyone else said, yes, yes, I want to sit down, I want to talk about this, because all of those lawmakers have been hearing from teachers,
Right.
Especially these lawmakers that were a part of this joint committee who toured the state. I mean, they heard from teachers all over Oregon. So that was really eye-opening. And then the teacher part of it, yes, the union said, do this, dig into this. Law enforcement, everyone was saying this is an issue, but I still was worried we weren't going to get teachers.
Yeah.
We needed teachers to tell us what was happening in the classrooms. And if you're watching Facebook Live right now and you are a teacher, please comment below. We want to hear from you. Talking to teachers, really, I think once we talked to them on the phone and we really were just super transparent about what we were doing, then they decided, okay, like we need to do this.
Yeah, it seemed like teachers that we spoke with desperately wanted to tell this story. I think it can get lost when we're talking about, a crisis and people getting hurt. It's scary and it's alarming, but at the end of the day, these teachers are realizing that they can't effectively do their job the way that it is now because of all these disruptions. And there's their kids we're talking about. They're like, elementary school kids. They're young kids. They're like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. These are not, like, you feel bad for the kids because even when a kid is acting out, is the term they use is dysregulated. It's not their fault. Like, something has not gone right in the way that in their development or in the way they're learning to cope with kind of these emotional issues to the point where it reaches this crisis level. So it's like we have to find out what's going on here and get to the bottom of it.
And you're so right. Oh yeah, Destiny.
That kind of answers a few. Well, we have a bunch of teachers in the comments saying, "Thank you for starting this conversation. Thank you for validating us." That sort of thing
great.
that you've experienced via email.
That's great.
What John was just saying sort of answers some of the questions we're getting. Like, why aren't these students being sent home? Like, why aren't these students being dealt with? Because they want to find a solution because they don't want to rob a student of education. You guys ran into that answer while you were.
Yes.
They want to help.
So that's really. So the question is, why aren't these students being sent home? So in all of these responses after the story aired, we've heard from several teachers saying you really need to look into that part of it because these teachers are saying per state law they can't suspend a student unless the student, intentionally, physically harms a student or teacher. So I think really the law part of it and whether they can send a student home and the suspension part of it, I think that's definitely the next step.
I feel like that we don't have a good answer for that question yet, and we're still, we want to report out that part of the story. So if any teachers out there have thoughts on that, please email us. Maybe Destiny can put up on the screen the email address we'll have that up in a second. So, because we've gotten an overwhelming amount of teachers have already written to us since our story first published and was aired yesterday on KGW News at 6 and published on KGW.com earlier in the day. I mean, literally 150 plus teachers emailing us, hundreds more of teachers and family members of teachers or parents, active community members writing on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, etc. That's an overwhelming amount of response. More response than I've ever seen for any story that I've covered.
I think it's the same. I don't think I've ever remember an investigation airing and getting that many people directly affected by the problem saying it's happening to me. But yes, these emails are so important because it helps us know where we need to go next.
Right.
One thing we were looking into when we were doing this story, we heard early on about these laws. Teachers being told by the district that they cannot touch students. So even if a student is being dysregulated, acting out, throwing furniture, throwing desks, these teachers are saying they can't touch the student. They have to do things like classroom clears, where they clear the entire room out. All the other students are sent out, and then that student stays in the room. We've heard things about herding, where a student runs away out of the room, out of the building, into the road, and these teachers are told they can't grab the student. They have to herd them, try to herd them back, guide them back safely to safety. So we heard about these laws, and so we started looking into it, and that's really when we interviewed Representative Barbara Smith Warner and Representative Brian Clem. They both said, it was a law passed 2011. It was a well-intended law, they said. It was in response to special needs students being restrained and put in seclusion rooms. So that law was passed, and then they said it's been misinterpreted. It's been misinterpreted across the state by these districts, and it's led to these classroom clears and hurting.
And we've heard from some teachers since the story aired who reminded us, rightfully so, that those laws were passed in 2011 up to 2013 for good reason. Mm-hmm. There were incidents that happened before that were not acceptable, as far as students being carried away, put in isolation rooms. Many people have seen the pictures of the isolation rooms. I mean, some of them looked like prison cells. Right. It was a problem that needed to be corrected. But what Representative Smith-Warner said that I found really fascinating was essentially the pendulum has maybe swung too far in the other direction, and now the law is being interpreted in a way that is causing unintended but real problems in our classrooms. Because right now, the way the law is being interpreted is that teachers can only physically restrain a student when there's some type of imminent physical threat, harm.
Right.
So like one teacher used the example when we were talking to her, where if a student were to run out of a classroom into the street, obviously that's not something any teacher wants to happen. If the student ran into the street and the street were empty, the teachers are being told, you can't touch them. But if a car were to come around the corner, now you can touch the student and pull them to safety. Only when there's that imminent threat of the car being there. But a kid just goes out and runs, hands off.
Right. And so that's what's leading to hurting, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, teachers are saying it doesn't work. These kids run around them, they go under them. This is when the physical aggression occurs. And we posted our story yesterday, and I mean, it went shared so many times, and the Oregon Department of Education called and said, look, here, and they cited some statutes, and they said, no, teachers can touch students. Here's the statutes. And I replied, well, but all the districts are telling them they can't. Right. So there's clearly a big disconnect. Destiny, we have a question?
Yeah, there's, some people are saying in the comments that, teaching is about building relationships, and it's really difficult when the class sizes are so large, and you heard that as well from some of the teachers and leaders.
Oh yeah, we heard from our teachers that we interviewed in our big group interview that these classes are too big, and if you have 1, 2, 3 students who become, the quote is dysregulated, having these outbursts, teachers say it's impossible to teach. So that is one part of the problem. And tonight at 5, we're looking at the OEA, that's the Oregon Educators Association's largest teachers union. They put out a report. They look at that too. They say class size, more support in schools, and we also interviewed. We look at a district trying to address this, which you did that interview, John.
Yeah, the Beaverton School District has realized that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and they've taken some steps to begin to identify and help students that they've think could have not the proper or appropriate level of emotional coping skills or behavioral coping skills. So they're trying to find those kids. They have in many of their elementary schools, they have different names for them, but names like success rooms or success coaches. And they're a room that's outside of the normal classroom setting where a student can go individually, maybe scheduled for 20 minutes a day, and they get personalized instruction from a counselor or school psychologist or a teacher who has special training in behavioral kind of learning. And they identify different ways to work with that student to help teach them some behavioral coping skills, some emotional coping skills. Those are kind of seem to be the underlying things that these students are not grasping of how to deal with their stress. And that maybe in Beaverton they think that the way we've always taught students isn't working, especially if this cohort of students that is kind of coming through elementary school right now, that you can't just teach math and language arts, but you need to also teach these emotional and behavioral skills. So they're taking steps to do that. They also have, in many of their elementary classrooms, they're called, I'm drawing a blank on the name now. Like the calming areas, they're like a little corner of the room, there's a blanket and a pillow, and a poster, chill room, a poster with like maybe some breathing exercises that a student can go if they're starting to maybe get worked up. They can go and just chill for 20 minutes, kind of maybe pull a blanket over and have the lights be low. And we saw this in kindergarten classes and first grade up to fifth grade classes.
Interesting. Yeah, that'll be in tonight's report as well. Destiny, we have some more questions?
Yeah, we have a teacher who says their school doesn't even have a full-time counselor, and that's some of the things that the teachers were saying to you, right? They need more staffing.
Yes, they need, I mean, all the teachers say they need help. They need more support in school. So they need aides, they need counselors, they need psychologists. There's some really interesting numbers. The federal recommendation is that there should be one counselor per 250 students, and Oregon classes or schools are just way
Oregon and many states. Most states they do not. Most states they don't meet that level. You know, many schools in Oregon are at the 1 to 300, 1 to 400, 1 to 500 level. And those are actually some of the better schools. Like Portland Public Schools, for example, is actually has a pretty good ratio, one of the better ratios in the states, especially for being such a large school district. And I believe, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's somewhere around 1 to 350, 1 to 400 is their district-wide ratio, which is still approaching double what the federal recommendations are. But there are some districts in Oregon that are 1 to 750, 1 to 1,000. Some districts.
Zero.
Yeah, there's some smaller districts where there's zero counselors. And that's a big part of what we heard is that teachers want more adults in the building to deal with students that have these needs. And it's not just kids who are identified as, quote, special needs. These are students that are in general education classrooms, but that need this attention. So whether that's paraeducators, and I should say we heard from some paraeducators, teachers' aides, and whatnot. You know, this issue affects them as much as it does teachers. We're kind of using the word teacher to encompass everyone who's in the educational setting. But I just want to be clear that, you know, we've heard these stories about teachers' aides being hurt or verbally assaulted, counselors, psychologists, I mean, all kinds of people. We had a bus driver write us saying these incidents happen on the school bus, and in that case, you're locked in a 40-foot metal canister with a student, you know, when they become dysregulated. So
there was a bus driver, there was a cafeteria worker, all employees emailing us, some paraeducators with some really heartbreaking emails saying how they've been injured by these students. Destiny, what else are people saying?
The teachers are saying that they wonder if the teachers you interviewed said the same, that they're not able to spend their time teaching because they're dealing with this, and so they're not able to do their job, and other kids are not able to get their learning in for the day.
Yeah, that's been the overall theme to this story. All of these teachers we interviewed, and I want to point out, these teachers were not complaining. And something the union pointed out I thought was really interesting. He said, the union president said, this has been happening for about 5 years, but schools have this tendency to try to solve it on their own. And they try and they try and they try before really bringing it out into the public. And he said it's just grown and grown and grown. So the schools have tried and tried, and it's just not happening. So the whole point is that these teachers were not complaining. They were saying, we feel so badly for the students who are having these issues, and we feel so badly for all of the other kids in the room because they're really losing that learning time. And one of the most powerful sound bites was from an elementary school. She's a fifth grade teacher. She said, think of that kindergartner who has had so many classroom clears throughout their, very short, educational career, that when that student gets to her in fifth grade, that student's lacking some very important fundamental skills. And you just multiply that. I mean, all of those students they're just losing they're losing all of those hours in the classroom. I think it's important.
Yeah, it's the frequency with which teachers are saying they're seeing these disruptions. There always has been some level of disruptive behavior in a classroom. You can never get this issue down to zero. That's just human nature, and every individuals, having different issues they're going to work for. But what we heard, and I think why we've had such an outpouring of response, is because there is something happening where the frequency of this, the scope of this, is increasing, and that's what. There's not a strong answer to the question of why, and we'll continue to address that because I don't think we've heard a good explanation. There's lots of theories, And I know lots of teachers have different theories as to why this is happening, but the what is clear.
Exactly. And if you are watching right now and you do have your own theories, we would love to hear from you. I think the most common theories are these students are experiencing trauma at home, homelessness, parent losing a job, and the device. You know, there have been studies where this is the first generation really since birth that have had an electronic device in their hand, phone, tablet. You know, their parents have had it and they've had it. And very interesting studies, but again, these are theories. These are not, you know, exact causes or long-term research on this. So
we had one interesting conversation with a teacher who pointed out that with the device issue, not only do kids have more devices, phones, tablets, computers, TVs in their personal life, but that over the last 10 years, there's been a huge push to bring more technology into the classroom, computers and iPads, Chromebooks, things like that. But there hasn't been kind of the developing a smart curriculum around that, you know, so that teachers aren't relying on technology to deal with, you know, what could be handled as a personalized lesson. And how do you make sure that you're teaching students who are getting iPads at a young age how to be good citizens online and good etiquette with a computer, and when it's appropriate to put the iPad down. And that is one. It's a compelling theory as to why kids aren't developing coping skills at the level that we're seeing it. Is that they're just relying on, you know, devices to kind of fill that void in their life. But you know, I think it's something that districts, teachers, lawmakers have to have a frank and honest conversation and realize that even if they had the best intentions in a lot of ways, that there may be unintended consequences.
with all these electronics. And Destiny, more questions?
Yeah, we've got
Comments?
a teacher in the comments who says 28 years in the classroom, and they said that parental involvement is really important. They see when parents are working with students that the issues typically aren't super prolonged, and we had another teacher chime in, their pre-K teacher, who said that parental involvement is really important, and that kind of gets at what the report was saying too, that this is a bigger issue.
Right. Yeah, and thank you all so much for your comments. Our story tonight focuses on this statewide report by the OEA, Teachers Union, and they said it really starts at home. I mean, yes, it's happening in the schools because it's happening in the communities. And we did hear a lot of comments focused on the parental involvement, you know, and the fact that parents don't know this is happening because these incidents are so common.
Yeah, and it gets back to the theories as to why this is happening, because a lot of the kids that are experiencing this were born around 2008, 2009, 2010, a time when our economy was not in a strong place. We're in the middle of a recession. Unemployment levels were high. Maybe you had more households where two parents had to be working 2 jobs or 3 jobs. And so maybe not even for any fault of their own, parents are spending less time with their young kids. And could that be a reason why that we're seeing these issues with behavioral and emotional skills now? We also hear teachers say it's not too late for parents to get involved.
Right.
Obviously, individually in their own kids' lives to the greatest degree possible, but also calling lawmakers, calling districts, pushing for change, pushing for, you know, all the teachers we say, what can be done, more funding for education, so there's more adults in the school who can help deal with these issues, give more personalized learning, smaller class sizes for students. You know, one teacher said, there have been plenty of times where teachers have gone to district administrators saying, we need this change, we need X change or Y change. And they're like, yeah, okay, maybe it'll happen, or happen slowly, or doesn't happen at all. Parents come with the same ask, and change happens.
Yeah, that really stuck out in my mind too. This teacher telling us, we've seen parents do really the unthinkable. Right. We've seen parents come together and demand change, and once the parents get together, that's when the districts start acting, or that's when the state starts acting. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Anything else, Destiny?
People are saying that the top-down, one-size-fits-all approach to solving these problems isn't going to work. You have people chiming in saying, you know, money is the problem, parental issues is the problem, you know, not disciplining children is the problem, and so they're kind of wondering what the teachers feel like the solution may be.
Interesting. I don't think there, at least in researching this story and doing this investigation, I agree with whoever said there is not one solution. So I think having the lawmaker change legislation so students can physically, teachers can physically assist students without fear of getting sued is one part of it.
Right, but that is just one facet. It's not going
One.
to solve the underlying problem. That almost
Right.
addresses how teachers deal with the
Right.
problem. It doesn't begin to get at why is this problem happening in the first place.
Right. Thank you all so much for watching. I have to go be on the 4 o'clock news here in a couple minutes, so we
Yeah.
are going to wrap this up.
Yeah, Chris will be on 4 o'clock news in just a moment talking with Kathy and Chris about this, and then please watch at 5. Stories at 5 because State of the Union is at 6, so we'll be preempted, but part 2, and we will stay on this story. So please keep sending your emails, tweet us, Kevin on Facebook.
Yeah. Email us, call Kristen at kgw.com. We have been overwhelmed, and we know we struck a nerve here, and we are so committed to this story. Tell us where to look next, and we'll listen. Thank you. Thanks, Destiny.